It's 1971 and I'm in Jakarta chatting with powerful Indonesian officials over drinks. I'm not just any consultant, I'm an economic hitman. My mission, convince this resource-rich country to take on massive loans that seem like development but squeeze them into debt captivity to serve US interests. But what if those loans aren't about help at all? What if they're weapons? Stick with me, there's more beneath this calm surface. Before you think these are just bad loans, consider how the whole system is rigged. Here's how innocent-sounding infrastructure projects turn into chains around a nation's neck. Back in Jakarta in the early 70s, I helped negotiate a $34 billion power plant deal. It wasn't just infrastructure, it was a setup. The loans were inflated. U.S. corporations won contracts. Indonesia's leaders believed the loans would modernize their country, not realizing they'd hand over political control by drowning in debt. Think of these loans like a giant bear hug, one that looks friendly but never lets go. Once a country says yes, the crushing pressure of repayments, often at impossible interest rates, forces them to make policy concessions and open their markets to foreign corporations. The bear hug, it's a straitjacket disguised as development aid. The real kicker, these loans aren't just economic tools. They act like invisible puppeteers binding countries to U.S. geopolitical goals. Through debt, the U.S. doesn't directly govern but controls economic decisions, resources, and sometimes election outcomes. It's power without firing a shot but with global consequences. Loan sharks aren't just about money. Perkins reveals a toolkit of dirty tricks, each more jaw-dropping than the last, to lock countries in and keep them down. In Ecuador, I once doctored financial reports to inflate projected benefits of a dam project. The numbers looked impressive on paper, fooling investors and officials alike. But on the ground, locals were displaced, environmental damage ignored, and the real cost far exceeded projections. These fake reports were smoke and mirrors, financial illusions to justify crushing debt. The game doesn't stop at numbers. Bribery flows like water, officials, media, even opposition players get a slice. Once, to keep a deal alive, a government official's personal weaknesses, scandals, secret affairs were exploited to guarantee loyalty. Sex and extortion became tools to mold political chessboards, keeping puppets dancing to U.S. tunes. Elections, often just theater. In Panama, another playable country, we funded opposition candidates we could control or sabotaged rivals with dirty tricks. This kept friendly regimes in power, ensuring governments stayed convenient for U.S. interests. Democracy in these places was more a stage than a reality. This isn't just a thriller, these orchestrated debts rip apart economies and lives. But through the darkness, Perkins offers surprising hope. Let's unpack the true stakes and what could come next. By the 1980s, Ecuador, Panama, and many others were buried under debt they could never realistically repay. Schools and hospitals suffered as funds funneled to loan payments. Ordinary people paid, with poverty rising and governments forced into submission. These were no accidents but calculated economic warfare with human faces. Here's the twist: while foreign countries get strangled, the U.S. itself isn't immune. As Perkins exposes, corporate power tightens around Washington, corrupting American democracy. Both abroad and at home, consent is manipulated. The twin costs, global instability and the erosion of U.S. citizen freedoms, two sides of the same coin. But Perkins doesn't leave it bleak. He proposes awakening, a global movement demanding transparency, fair lending, and true democracy. Imagine a world where loans help instead of enslave, where justice breaks greed. That vision might feel distant, but understanding the game is the first step to breaking the cycle. Remember that evening in Jakarta, the drinks, the deals, the half-truths? They weren't just about development. They were about control, power, and shadows that stretch across decades. Next time you hear about foreign aid or loan packages, look beyond the numbers and ask, who really benefits? Here's your takeaway: think critically about debt, question easy solutions, and demand accountability in global finance. That's how we start rewriting the script. Subscribe for more book summaries like this one.